Farmer Stephanie here in the month of March. It is officially spring and it is warm enough to start getting out in the garden. As you can see, this is the space that I have to work with, this brick-lined area that basically outlines the perimeter of the backyard. I do get creative, as I've mentioned, with some of my front spaces, and so throughout the year hopefully we'll get a chance to see what some of that looks like as well. Right now in spring, everything is pretty much a blank canvas. I start thinking about what I might want to start planting where, as well as looking for signs of life in my perennial plants. Perennial plants are plants that come back each year. And so that's the majority of what I'm going to be doing today, is I'm going to go around and check all of my flowers and fruit plants to see if they have signs of leafing out or budding out and see what I can expect to grow this year. So back here in this back corner of my garden, I have some pink pots where I planted some currant cuttings. Currants are a fruiting plant that is one of the first fruits to produce in the spring. And so these are always the first thing that I check because they also leaf out the earliest. These are cuttings that I took from some white currant plants that I had at my former house. And so as I come and check, I put 2 in each pot. I want them to develop some really good roots in these pots before I move them to their permanent location on the east side of my house. So I see I have 2 in this pot that have leafed out, and they're looking nice and good and strong. In this middle pot over here, I have one that's just starting to bud and leaf a little bit here, and I have another one down here that I don't see any signs of green on, and so I'm a little concerned that that one might not have made it through the winter. I potted these up sort of in late fall, so they might not have gotten a good chance to develop some strong roots before they got too cold. So we'll keep an eye on this guy and see if he comes through. And then in my other pot, I have 2 good strong cuttings. And so hopefully these will survive the spring and get some nice good leaves and root growth, and they'll go into their permanent location later in the spring. The next thing I like to check over here on the deck is my plants that are in these planters. In these big black planters, I have blueberry bushes, and so I'm very excited to check them because I get so excited about blueberries. These have some good green growth. They have good strong buds on them, and so I think they're going to pull through the winter just fine. And I would expect that because I've had these blueberry plants in these planters for about 5 or 6 years now, and they've done well every year, and so I wouldn't really expect anything different this year. Sharing a planter with these blueberries are my cranberry plants. Both blueberries and cranberries like very acidic soil. And so the other thing that I'm checking is these cranberry plants to make sure that they're greening up. Over here along one wall of our garage, we have tulips in the dirt. And then if I look on these trellises, these are Arctic kiwi plants. And so these I also transplanted from my old house. And so last year I wasn't sure if they were going to do okay, but they did make it, and I see that this year as well, they do have some green growth. And so it looks like those will do well this year as well. Over here on this fence, we have some grape plants that I, again, transplanted from my former house. I moved 3 of these grape plants over here. They were initially evenly spaced along this fence, but it looks like one of the plants didn't make it. It never really took, and I don't see any kind of a stem or stub or anything down here, but we'll keep an eye on it and see if something sprouts up from a root system that may have survived the winter. Over here, these 2 plants took a lot better when I initially retransplanted them here, and so I'm hoping that they made it through this winter. They look pretty dry. I don't really see any green on this one. Sometimes we see some growth from down here at the bottom of the plant, but I don't really see anything there, so that's a little bit worrisome, although it is still just a little bit cold for grapes here. And so let's check out this other one and see. Again, it's pretty brown. I don't see any green growth that would suggest life. But again, let's check down here, down at the bottom. And if I look very, very closely, I do see one little green bud here down at the bottom near the stem. And so I think this plant did make it. If I look a little bit closer right here, I see some buds right at that junction there. And so I think we're going to be in luck with this grape plant here, at least on the right. That does give me hope for the plant on the left, that maybe it's just a little bit too early for these to be budding, and I may see some more signs of life in the next week or two. Back here behind the garage is the last of my plants that I transplanted from my previous home. Back here it looks fairly barren right now, but I did transplant 2 blackberry plants. My goal eventually is to turn this into a blackberry patch. And so here is the first of the blackberry plants. And it's still looking pretty brown. I don't see any buds, I don't see any growth on it. Over here, however, is my second plant, and I do see some greening of that wood. And so I think at least that second blackberry plant made it. And hopefully, if that one grows nice and big and strong, I can take some cuttings of that plant this year and start making smaller plants to help fill in this patch. And maybe put some stepping stones and maybe some other garden decor back here, instead of it being just sort of a barren space. Over here, we have the last of my fruit plants, and it's this tree here, which is a patio peach tree. This has been here and established for a few years, so I'm not concerned about this either. And I see that it does have some buds and maybe even just a few leaves branching out. This is a patio peach tree. It does have purplish leaves, and it's an ornamental peach tree. It will make very small fruits, but I've never gotten a chance to eat them because the squirrels always get to them before I do. Of course, in addition to checking on all of my fruit plants every day and looking for buds and leaves on my fruit plants, I am still keeping up with my seed starting inside here in the basement. As you can see, I have started to fill up some of my shelving unit here with various types of plants. Up top here, I have various pepper and tomato plants in their little newspaper pots. In these pots, they're forming a strong root system, and fairly soon I expect them to start shooting out a lot of foliage once they feel they have a really good root system. And so once they start adding height and a little bit more leafing, I will start up-potting these into bigger pots where they'll stay and grow until they're ready to transplant outside. Down here on this bottom shelf right here, I have some of my taller plants that are already in bigger containers. In the front here, these are various types of mint plants. I recently had the ability to go visit a botanical garden where they also had a nursery where they sold specialty mint plants. And so I purchased some of these specialty mint plants like orange mint and apple mint and chocolate mint. But it's a little bit too cold outside here to put them outside yet. And so I'm keeping them inside here in the basement under my lights until it warms up just a little bit more and I can put them in some pots outside. I am going to put my mint plants in pots so that they don't become invasive. Mint spreads very readily. And so I have a plan to put some of these in some colorful pots, maybe in a little rock garden along the house, and have a little mint garden there. Back here, just behind the mint plants, I do have some other taller plants that have already been put into a little bit bigger pots. Most notably, as you've been following along in my series, I have my sweet potato plants here on this half of this container. They are in these larger sized newspaper pots, and so soon my tomato plants and pepper plants will also go in a larger newspaper pot like this. And again, most of my plants will stay in this larger sized newspaper pot until they're ready to go outside. There might be a few plants that I put in a little bit larger plastic container. Over here, I have the last of my seeds that I'm starting for the year. I have most of my tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, herbs, those types of plants that maybe stay a little bit smaller as they're sending out roots. Over here, I have plants that grow very tall when they first germinate. I have some bean plants over here. I have some fennel. And then over here, I just started these the other day, so they're not really germinating yet. But in these plastic containers, I have my cucumbers and zucchini and squash and plants like that. They will send out very big leaves and very big roots very quickly. They have big seeds. And so I have them started in a little bit bigger containers here, where I have one seed started per well or per opening in these plastic seed packs. And with that, that's what I'm up to here in March. It's mostly just a month of waiting for my plants to grow bigger so I can put them in bigger pots, waiting for my new seeds to germinate, and waiting for all of those fruit plants outside to send out buds and leaves that tell me, yes, they did make it through the winter and they're going to give me fruit this year. So far, everything outside looks pretty good. We'll keep an eye on that one currant cutting that may not have made it, and we'll also keep an eye on those grapes and blackberries that may not have gotten very fully established last year when they were first planted. And hopefully, when we come back in April, we'll see that everything did survive the winter and is sending out nice foliage, nice leaves, and maybe even the currants will be starting to send out some flower buds. Again, those are a cooler weather fruit, and so they do tend to send out flower buds quite early, and usually the fruit will be ripe by maybe early June. And so stay tuned and we'll see what happens in April.